you so much for having me here today. And I'm really grateful to be back at my alma mater. It's always great to be here at St. Mary's. So tonight, what I want to do is take you through a little bit of the journey of how did I end up where I am now. You had this very nice introduction, thank you very much, of my history. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how did I end up here, how did I find my purpose, and to think through what does that mean for many young people right now. I am currently the executive director of the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative, and we are housed at Dalhousie University. I always find that a little funny. Yes, here I am. And I remember the days when Dalhousie graduates used to make fun of St. Mary's graduates, and now I tell them, you pay me to work here. So as we talk through tonight, I want to give a little bit of that journey, because in my role, I do get a lot of interaction with students at Dalhousie, at St. Mary's, and from all over the world. And one of the key things that is very important is to recognize that I didn't have it all figured out in the beginning, just as many others don't have it figured out in the beginning, and it's okay. I'm going on 49, and I still wonder if I have it figured out. So in my journey, the purpose that I want to talk about and how I believe that I have found what that purpose is, I think that that's the greatest struggle that we have currently in the world. So the work that I am doing on the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative to try to end the use of child soldiers being recruited and used around the world, a large part of it is because there are many young people who are trying to find a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, and a sense of purpose. And if we can understand that, then we can understand the ways to address it. And tonight, that's what I want to talk you through a little bit. So it was a long time ago when I first was here at St. Mary's University. 1989 was when I graduated from high school. Some of you here were not born at that point and probably think of that as quite ancient. There are others of you who may resonate very much with that. But at that time, I came to St. Mary's University, and I had registered in a Bachelor of Commerce degree because my parents felt that that was the thing that I should do. They thought at that time, as a young woman, that this was the right time for women to enter business, and surely this would be something of success for me to follow. So I really had no clue what that was all about, and I thought they must be right. My father was a high school principal. Surely he understood what I was about to embark on. And so when I began that process, what I realized very soon was that I was much more interested in the business of partying than I was in the business I was learning in school. And shortly after that, I had to have a moment where I would say, either I find something that I'm interested in, or I'm going on a very dangerous downward path. I was very fortunate because I was also a member of the SMU women's soccer team. Without that anchor in my life, I probably would have easily have just fallen off and thought, who cares about university? Why do I need to be here? And wouldn't have had the sense of belonging and meaning that I had. But that group of women that I became very close to were the ones who often provided me that meaning that I was looking for, and inspiration. I recall that probably one of the most important periods of my time being here was when I had a wonderful conversation who was then the Dean of Arts here at St. Mary's University, Dr. Mike Larson. He wanted to have a conversation with me about my trajectory. His daughter and I both played on the soccer team together, and there I was excelling in that sport, but I was doing very poorly academically. And when we had this conversation, he was the one who said to me, I really think you should take political science. And I thought to myself, he's crazy. I don't know anything about politics. Why would I want to enter into that realm? But as we had the conversation about it and what it really meant, he said, I want you to try it out. And what was so interesting was that I took that route based on his advice. And to this day, he now says that none of his children listened to his advice, but I did. And when I took that advice from him, it totally changed my life, because I went from being like just barely getting by to a straight A student. I had found something that was appealing to me, because what I was focusing on was issues that were happening in the world at that time. Things related to how could I make a difference in the world. And through that, I became involved in the politics that was going on at that time. And in 1993 to 1994, that became a really pivotal moment in my trajectory of life. For those of you who do know and understand world politics, there was a war going on in the former Yugoslavia, and then there was a genocide happening in Rwanda. And the way that the world reacted to those two particular conflicts that was happening at the same time was very different. I could see there was a lot of attention, both media, money, resources being put into what was taking place in a European nation that was clearly one that had resonance with many people in, say, North America and other parts of Europe. And then we had the genocide taking place in Rwanda, and most people didn't even know anything was going on. That was coupled with the fact that we had elections going on in South Africa for the first time with the end of apartheid. So I recall exactly seeing the images of the bodies floating down the river and in Lake Victoria. And at that time, I can remember thinking, how is it that the world could stand by and watch that and not feel compelled to do anything about it? So from there, what I understood was that the world was a lot bigger than this little world that I was in here, and I decided that that would be where my trajectory for studying would be. So I ended up going to the UK. I studied there and did my graduate studies in the UK, both my master's and my PhD, and what I focused on was very much related to genocide and to finding ways to end mass atrocities. But I think that one of the points that I'm raising here about being bold with your ideas and confident that you should challenge the status quo. All along my career path, there were many people who would tell me I wasn't smart enough, or maybe I didn't have exactly the right background to be involved in a particular element. But I could understand that if I was passionate about something and I really wanted it and I really worked hard, it didn't matter what anyone else had to say about your abilities. And that became very clear to me as I took my first professional job, which would be to work with Stephen Lewis at UNICEF headquarters in New York. Working with Stephen was life-altering for me. He defined for me what it means to have a commitment to human rights, and at the same time, how to be humble and how to inspire others. He led me on a path that led me to Africa. Finally, I would get there to work with the former president of that country. And that would be the time when I worked on the peace process in the DRC, would be the first time that I would physically have interactions with children who were being recruited and used as soldiers. I recall being guarded by soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and two particular soldiers one night who were clearly children. They had asked me for some cigarettes, and I remember trying to be this upright Canadian who was working on this peace process and feeling like there are these kids asking me for cigarettes, and I'm trying to be neutral in this dialogue, and how could I possibly, hand them anything, and what would be the situation, the outcome. But what I realized when I went into my room that night is that I thought about their age, and I thought about who's looking after them. And it made me also think that it was a pretty stupid thing that I just told two young guys with AK-47s out my side of my room who were charged with guarding me that night, that I wouldn't give them something as simple as cigarettes. So the next day when I went out in the morning and I thought about that they'd been there for more than 24 hours straight and I didn't know how they were being fed, let me give them some money, and I handed them some money, and I said, go buy whatever food you would like with this particular money. I am sure that they needed it. They did, and they were extremely grateful, and to the point where I had probably more attention than I needed at that point, but I understood the dilemmas that they were in, and I thought about their purpose and what will become of them. That led me back here to Canada eventually. And when I came to Canada, I had the opportunity to work with General Dallaire. And this being bold and this being confident and challenging the status quo, when he and I first started to talk about the work that he was doing to end child soldiers, I thought what he was doing was unique, but I told him what he was doing was all wrong. And from that moment, he thought if I had the chutzpah to tell him that what he was doing was wrong, then probably I was worthy to have an ear from him. And so we began a journey, and 10 years on from that, I have been the executive director of this initiative and have built it, and now we are moving all around the world. 30 staff members that are now working with us, and I started out very humbly with one other staff member 10 years ago, and we are making a mark in the world. But most importantly to me is to recognize that these issues that we are addressing are issues that affect us here at home as much as they are issues that affect many nations around the world. So in this journey of putting children's rights up front, raising children as a priority on the peace and security agenda is at the very core of what we do. And that collaboration is key around the world to finding better solutions to addressing this particular problem. That means oftentimes telling other big people that their ideas need to be challenged as well. And I've had the good fortune in this life to do that. Last year was a huge moment for me to meet Pope Francis at the Vatican last January and to talk to him about the peace process in South Sudan. We talked about the need to put children as a priority and asked for his assistance. 3 months later, he called all of the parties to the peace process in South Sudan to the Vatican, and there's a historic picture of him kissing the feet of the leaders at that time. Now, is that only because of what we said? I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it felt wonderful to be able to have a conversation with someone about the dire need for children in a country like South Sudan who wanted to listen and is willing to use his particular offices to advance that. Prime Minister Trudeau and the agenda of the Canadian government have been something that we have helped to also set forward. And in 2017, we co-wrote with them the Vancouver Principles on peacekeeping and the prevention of the recruitment and use of child soldiers. That has led to 95 countries around the world endorsing those principles. And I know it says Vancouver Principles. Everyone says it should be the Halifax Principles. We would agree. Unfortunately, the Minister of National Defense, who we worked with, was from Vancouver, and the Defense Ministerial was in Vancouver. But you can all know it came from here in Halifax. And then the journey has continued in so many ways. President Kagame, who is the president of Rwanda, we worked very closely with on creating a center of excellence in Rwanda. And we're really looking at how that's helping to build the momentum around the world to end the recruitment and use of children as soldiers. Obviously, my beginnings of this story talking to you about Rwanda and the connections that it has to what we are trying to achieve around the world are very important dynamics. And then the last picture on the right you will see there is myself with Masai Ujiri, and if anyone's a Toronto Raptors fan, you know who he is. So the wonderful thing about this job is the opportunity to meet people like him who are trying to do good in the world, and we're collaborating with him and the Giants of Africa towards the Commonwealth Summit this summer in Kigali. So when I say about being bold, finding your purpose, not knowing exactly where you may be, just recognize that you can have a bit of patience with that, but believe that anything is possible, because there's no way that I thought in 1989 that these pictures would be what I would have up here today. I thank you very much for your time and attention.